My father died when I was 11 years old, just a month short of my 12th birthday. My mother immediately went down the rabbit hole of drugs and alcohol, so I didn't just lose one parent, I lost both. The life insurance check from my dad's death went to my grandma. Up until that point, she had always been the most stable person in my life. But shortly after my dad died, my grandma's husband of 10 years left her for his affair partner. This led to my grandma getting started on meth and heroin, and a sick gambling addiction to boot. In the beginning, she did make sure that all of our needs were met, but things only got progressively worse over the next 6 months. I was the eldest of my 3 siblings, and eventually we were living in the house with no water, no electricity, and no food. Things got so bad that my grandma was now stealing our food stamps to sell for her habits. While no adult in the house worked, I knew that my grandma got her Social Security check every month. So eventually I started going into her room and taking most, if not all of her cash while she slept at night. Or if she'd already bought drugs with the cash checks, I would take the drugs and sell them to local dope heads. At first, I used this money by splitting it up between my siblings in order to get vending machine snacks at school, or I'd go to Walmart up the street and buy school clothes before school started. I'd then tell my grandma that the clothes were donated to us. One Christmas, she didn't bother to get us anything, but on Christmas Eve, she went to the Dollar Tree to get us some notebooks. I left $80 in each of the notebooks for each of my siblings. But as you can imagine, with no solid adult influence in my life, I started to go down a bad path too. At around the age of 13, I began keeping more of the funds for myself than what I did previously, and using it to buy weed or alcohol or cigarettes. It was about 2 months before my 14th birthday when me and all of my siblings got put into DHS custody. We've all aged out of the system now, except for my youngest brother, who's 16. Both my grandma and mom got clean within the last 2 years. My grandma will often tell me about the bad friends she had that stole from her all of the time, and that's why she couldn't get us food or school clothes or pay the bills. It's obvious to me that she doesn't realize that I was the quote bad friend taking all of her money. I could see how it would be confusing though, because at any given point during our worst, my grandma would open up our house to at least 4 other dope fiends in our neighborhood. They'd crash out with us, staying for weeks or months on end. Our house was basically the #1 dope house in the entire neighborhood, so it's easy for me to imagine just why she would think that other fiends were ripping her off. I came here to post this because it's weighed on my soul pretty heavily. I think my grandma's a good person at heart. She was just going through it. Is this something that I should tell my grandma about? Should I tell her that I was responsible for taking her money? Or is this the type of secret that would be best kept as a secret? I'm gonna apologize up front if this entry is rather lengthy for some of you. I used to work at a suicide prevention hotline. I didn't talk about my job at family reunions, and for some reason, I was always so secretive about it. I felt like every person, every single one ringing through the call center, was a close friend of mine. I understood where they were coming from, and I was very emotional over everything when I was talking to a caller. I was told before my interview exactly how serious this job was. There would be children, really young kids on the verge of giving up. There would be kids who feel like death is the only way out because they're poor or not accepted in their family. They're gay, trans, or being bullied relentlessly. There would be older men who were veterans who couldn't get over flashbacks. Some without any family or money or even a home. There would be younger men and women around my age and occasionally under 20 who had been in wars and couldn't take the weight of the things they had done. They usually had adoring families, children that barely knew their parents, or siblings who wanted to be just like them. Some of them even gave me numbers to pass messages on to. That's something that broke me. Call this number. Tell my wife and kids that I love them more than anything. That's a call that I remember specifically. It hit me more than anything ever had up until that point in my life. I was trying to keep my composure on my side of the phone, and I ended up saving him, but that one did stick with me. Just a day after this interaction, I lost my first caller. It was so early into my career, but I did everything I could within my power and knowledge. There was a girl that called. She just sounded tired, unbelievably tired, as if her soul had nothing left to give. She was drained. I remember that her name was Amber. She told me that she had made a decision and that I had no reason to try and help her. She was going to die, and she just needed someone to be there for her. As Amber went on, I stalled as long as I could. Family? None. Therapy? Never helped. I went through all the motions and heard Amber from the other side of the phone tell me to stop. She had given up, and I guess I caved. I told her that I would really miss her, and I was there if she would please change her mind. No such luck. I remember my exact words after. "I'm here, Amber. I care about you, and I'm sorry that it's gotten to this point. I'll remember you, and I'll think about you every day. I promise that." There was no reply from the other side of the phone, just a few seconds of silence, and then a bang so loud that I dropped the phone onto the desk. They forced me to take the rest of the week off. I stayed home and cried more than I care to admit. I wrote Amber 03-05-13 on a little sticky note and put it up on my wall. I wasn't ready for this job, and I knew it, but I sucked it up because I wanted to be the hero that I thought I was. After 4 years of working that hotline, I quit. I was starting to go back into that toxic mindset. I had lost so many people, and every one of them that I knew about had a name and date on my wall. It was something that I just couldn't stop thinking about. If I wasn't the hero, if I couldn't save everyone, then what was I? What was I even there for? Why did I exist on an earth where I let so many people down? I was beginning to have graphic thoughts of my own death, and then really violent dreams to follow. That's when I quit. The only reason I'm here sharing my experiences as a hotline worker is to maybe help out someone that sits in the same chair that I did, letting them know that we're all human. You can't save everyone, although that shouldn't stop you from trying your very best. And when the time comes, it's okay to know when you've done all that you can. There's a reason they say you have to put on your own oxygen mask before you can help others do the same. I've always felt like something about me was different. I couldn't explain it, not exactly. It was just something quiet, this lingering sense that I didn't quite fit. Like I was a puzzle piece that had been forced into the wrong place. But I never questioned my family. I had a dad who loved me, a mother who cared for me, and siblings who never treated me as anything less than their own. But then a month ago, that fragile reality shattered. Now I wish that I had never learned the truth. My mother was 25 when it happened. She worked as an in-home nurse, a career that she had always been passionate about. She took care of the people who couldn't care for themselves, people who were too sick, too elderly, too vulnerable. It was part of who she was, the selfless, nurturing kind. And that kindness is what ruined her life. There was a patient she served, an elderly woman, whose son was a known creep around town. He was 15 years older than my mom and still living at home. He had a reputation for making people feel uncomfortable, but reputations alone aren't enough to warn someone before it's too late. This man would go on to assault my mom. She never stood a chance against him. He overpowered her, took something from her that she could never get back, and then left her to deal with the wreckage on her own. 2 months later, she found out that she was pregnant with me. She couldn't bring herself to terminate. I don't know if it was guilt, hope, or just sheer paralysis from trauma, but she couldn't do it. And she also wasn't sure if the baby was his or not. She had been in a long-term relationship with my dad for 7 years. He loved her, and she loved him. So she clung to that love, praying that the timing would work out in her favor, that the child would be his, and that this nightmare would somehow have an escape route. But deep down, I think she already knew the truth. For 3 years, she held on to that fragile hope. She raised me as if I was my dad's, alongside the man that she loved. And for 3 years, she carried an immense burden that nearly broke her. Then the threats started. Her attacker wanted more. He used my existence as leverage, blackmailing her, tormenting her, forcing her into this sick sexual game of control. He knew the truth, and if she didn't give in to his demands, he threatened to tell my dad, to take me away, to make her life a living hell. And for 3 years, she carried this heavy weight alone, until she couldn't anymore. When she finally told my dad, she expected the worst. Who wouldn't? How do you tell the man you love that the son he's been raising isn't really his? That he was born from an act of violence, and not from the loving home that they had created? But my dad, who is my real dad in every way that matters, stayed. He supported her, protected her, and somehow, even through his own heartbreak, still saw me as his son. He admitted later that it wasn't easy, that it nearly broke him, that realizing his firstborn wasn't really his absolutely wrecked him. But he wasn't just going to throw me away, because love isn't just blood, it's choice, and he chose to love me. The man who hurt my mother didn't want me because he loved me. He didn't care about me, my well-being, or my future. He wanted power over my mother. He wanted visitation rights. He wanted a court order that would force my mother to let him see me. Not because he wanted a son, but because he wanted to keep seeing her. The fight that followed nearly ruined my family. Court battles drained them financially, emotionally, and mentally. My parents went nearly $20,000 into debt just trying to keep me away from this man. They fought tooth and nail, knowing that the legal system was never really designed to protect victims. A DNA test was done. The truth was now undeniable. I was his. And because there wasn't enough evidence to charge him for what he did, despite the act that everyone in town knew what kind of man he was, there was nothing stopping him from gaining access to me. And the battle went on for years. But by the time I was 5, my parents finally won. He was blocked from gaining parental rights, and I was raised as if none of it had ever happened. I didn't remember any of it, and maybe that was a blessing. For 19 years, I lived in peace. I had no idea. My mother never let on that she carried that weight, that she had spent years crying herself to sleep, taking scalding hot showers to try and cleanse herself of something that could never be washed away. But a month ago, he found me. I was at work when he walked in. I didn't know who he was at first. Just another customer. Just another stranger passing through those doors. But then he spoke, and he told me that I was his son. He then pulled out my birth certificate with his name on it. He showed me pictures of myself as a child, things that I had never seen before. He called my mother a liar. He begged me to visit him. But he never once asked about me, who I was, how my life had been, what kind of person I had become. He wasn't interested in knowing me. He was only interested in destroying the people who had fought so hard to protect me. He left before I could even process what had happened. And when I went home that night, I saw something that I never thought I'd see. My dad, the strongest man that I know, was broken. He told me everything. He told me about the courts, about the threats, about the years my mother spent in silent agony, about the nights that she spent sobbing, feeling dirty just knowing that I shared DNA with that horrible man. And now, I can't escape it. I hate it. I hate him. I hate that I look like him. I hate that no matter what I do, I'll always be genetically tied to that monster. I think about it all the time. I think about whether something inside of me is broken, if I share something deeper than just looks. My worst fear is that I could become like him. I wish I could go back to not knowing. Part of me wishes that I had never been born. No one else knows the truth. My siblings don't know. My grandparents don't know. It's a secret my parents have kept buried for nearly 2 decades. And now, it's mine to carry too. I don't know what I'll do if he comes back. But the one thing that I know is that while he may have fathered me, he's not my dad. My dad is the man who stayed. And that's something that will never change.